I'm Mary Starr, and I'm pleased today to have as our guest Tom Glass. He recently announced his candidacy for the Texas House District 17. He has 5 counties that he's responsible for that's in his district. We've got Caldwell, Lee, Bastrop, Milam, and Burleson counties. All of these counties have rural small towns, and it truly is a grassroots area. I have visited the area personally many times, and it is a beautiful area with wonderful people. Tom, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background?
Well, I guess I'd start off saying I'm a grandfather and a father and a husband. I have raised my family in Houston. I worked for ExxonMobil most of my career, although I did oil service and space a little bit too along the way, and computers along the way. I did an IT career at Texas at ExxonMobil. I'm a Texas Aggie with a chemical engineering degree, and then I got an MBA from Harvard and then married a wife, a wonderful woman who's a successful trial attorney. And when I was in about 45, she persuaded me to go night school. Exxon paid for it to U of H to get a law degree, which I used as a public policy finishing tool. Since I've retired from Exxon back in end of 2013, I've gone to the legislature 6 times, kind of full time, working on trying to get bills passed that I wanted to get passed. Of the big two that I started off with in 2015 were the trying to harden our grid against threats like solar flares and nuclear EMP, which would bring down the grid and be very bad for all of America and Texas. And I also started working on trying to push back on the feds when they violated the Constitution in Texas. And to make that work, I found out that they didn't really care what one guy thought. I kind of came up and said, I have some good ideas. You want to hear them? And they would go, who are you with? And I said, okay, I see how the game's played. They don't care about my ideas. They care about my political clout. So
Right.
I just created some groups on Facebook. One of them was Texas Constitutional Enforcement, and the other was called Protect the Texas Grid. And started, and they grew and grew and grew. Facebook, of course, during the COVID stuff, started suppressing us. They actually took down Texas Constitutional Enforcement for 72 hours after we shared a live stream from frontline doctors on the efficacy of hydroxychloroquine during COVID. During COVID, we shifted Texas Constitutional Enforcement, expanded our scope. We'd always said, good conservatives in Texas need to understand the Constitution, and we need to push back on what the feds are doing to violate the rights of Texans and that are beyond the bounds of the Constitution. And it's the responsibility, and the framers expected the state officials, our state legislature and our governor and our attorney general, et cetera, and our sheriffs to push back on unconstitutional federal acts. But then all of a sudden, the tyranny, although it was certainly pushed and backed, and a whole bunch of it came out of DC from the bureaucracy, the implementation of the tyranny was being visited upon us by executive order by the governor and county judges and mayors. And we said, well, okay, maybe we need to focus on that a little bit because that's the biggest liberty issue of the time. And so we started looking at the Texas Bill of Rights and the Texas Constitution and how that was being violated by the lockdowns and the mask mandates and the vax mandates and all that sort of stuff. So my scope has expanded over the years. I go to the state conventions of the Republican Party. I was on the Republican Party Platform Committee in 2022. And I also, when I'm not doing the platform in 2022, all the other times I was there, I go to the legislative priorities committee before the convention starts and try to get my issues injected into the priorities. For the first time last session in 2024, we were successful. We got in federal overreach and protect the Texas grid or secure the Texas grid, the electric grid, I think is what it was, to be one of the top 8 priorities of the Republican Party. And as a result, in my opinion, as a result of the grid stuff becoming a priority of the Republican Party, we actually, after 6 sessions of trying and resistance by the transmission companies, we actually got our bill passed to formally and systematically look at the threats to our grid from all hazards. And it's not action yet, but it's the first step. And it took forever to get even the first step in a long journey. So I'm very pleased with that. So that's a
Well,
little bit of background. Yeah.
I'm very pleased too because we all remember the epic power issues that we had, the rolling blackouts, the freezing weather. None of us had ever lived through that. I kind of made a deal with God. I don't know that I've kept up my end of the bargain, but it's like, God, I promise I will never ever complain about the July and August heat again because it was so cold. Now, I'm not sure I kept up my end of the bargain, but I have tried. But that was something that you live in Texas, so you escape that. And it's like I took a picture, literally a picture of my thermometer that showed 0 degrees outside. That doesn't happen in Texas. It just doesn't. So
Yes.
let's talk about. I'm very impressed with the issues that you consider your top priorities for your campaign. Let's talk about that.
Okay. Yes. Right now, up on my website, tomglass.org, I have my issues defined. I ran last time for this same position against the same incumbent. And so this is going to be a repeat of that, hopefully done differently and better at a higher level to obtain success. But the issues that I put up on my website that are up there are that I did last time were border was the number one. I'm going to come over to my computer. And the second one, I said just in general, the pushing back on globalist and Marxist domination coming from the outside Texas. Well, and I guess nowadays inside too, but, and that includes a whole bunch of areas, including enforcing the Constitution.
Well, I want to just throw something in here. A lot of
Yes.
people don't realize there is a strong correlation between those three topics that you have just mentioned. There's a reason why our border has been like it is. There's a
Yes.
reason for where that came from, and that it is also tied to our Constitution and violations of our immigration policy. All of those are tied together, and a lot of people completely miss that. So if you want to speak to
Yes.
that, I'd be very happy.
And I agree with that. Let me, well, I'll finish up summarizing the other issues. The other thing is it's very big for our district is we are kind of ground zero because we are blessed with ample aquifers of water underneath the
Yes.
district. And that has become a target for many other places outside the district, including San Antonio, and a lot of stuff along the I-35 corridor, including the town that you went to school in, San Marcos, etc. Georgetown is now trying to get some out of Burleson County. And the problem is when San Antonio started drilling in Burleson County, right across the border, the wells all around there in Burleson and in northeast Lee County started dropping. Some have dried up as a result of the pumping to go to San Antonio. And so more and more people in our district are realizing it's just not the country people who are relying directly on wells, but all the small cities in the district are using well water as well. And, and we're realizing that we've got a long-term problem unless we stop the continued draining of our aquifers. And
Quick question.
so go ahead. Huh?
I'm sorry. I hate to interrupt, but I have to ask a question. What is the water table in your area right now? What level?
Well, that depends on where you are. I'm up at a high altitude. I'm on live on one of the highest peaks in the district,
Mhm.
uh, and so I think the last time we checked, my water level, the water level was like 290 feet.
Okay.
Uh,
What about in valleys where you're not up on a mountain peak or hilltop?
I think. Well, I don't know. It's in the 200. I think most of it's in the 200s.
Well,
It's where the water level is. Now, of course, those water levels drop when the things are being drained. I could give a whole lecture on all the issues related to water. And there's a whole bunch of stuff happened this last legislative session,
yes.
but there's a whole bunch more that needs to be done. I hope to continue to focus on it. I will say this. We have never in Texas put into statute what defined what rights to water mean. And as a result of that, the Supreme Court back in the early 90s, like 1905 or so, said, well, okay, if the legislature won't do anything about this, we'll make up a rule and we'll just start applying it. And they call it the rule of capture, which is, in my opinion, a ridiculous way to define property rights for water. But what rule of capture says is first person to get it up out of the ground gets to use it however they want. The reason why and they say that's a property right. That's your right to do that. Well, the thing is, if my neighbor goes and sucks my aquifer dry and profits by it, they don't have the right to do that. In my opinion, that's a taking of my water. And I think we've got to get a better definition of property rights. Specifically, the rule that I would use is you can use water that's underneath you for purposes that you have up above you in your surrounding area, including business and including municipal water and all that sort of stuff. But if you want to take water and ship it outside of the district in which you live, that's more of a taking than it is a property right. We've got to figure out how to transition into that way of thinking before I think the ultimate solution will prevail. We've made some good progress on that this session. For instance, the constitutional amendment that will be on the ballot in November says we're going to dedicate tax money every year to water infrastructure development. But part of that language, which I urged that they put in, saying that you can't use that money to drain our aquifers. You have to do it for new sources like desalinization. So, yeah, go ahead.
It's interesting because just a few days ago, I was visiting out of state, and this lady overheard me having a conversation with someone else and told where I lived. She said, "Oh, well, tell me about that town. We're interested in possibly moving there." So I told her about it, and she said, "Our biggest concern, though, is the water." And I'm like, yes, that is a concern because all of the hill country, we are desperately, water is a serious issue here. So
Right.
honestly, I would like to come back and do a deep dive into the water issues on a separate podcast another time because I I think this is a very important issue that all of Texas needs to really understand, especially since it's going to be on the ballot. So
Yes, yes.
if
And
I
the
would,
fourth issue, yeah, I'll move on to my fourth issue, and that is um, I work on the priorities of the Republican Party of Texas, which of course is another a big, humongous issue. I mean, there's 8 priorities every time, and you can do deep dives into each one of those areas. The ones I served on 2 committees this time around. The way the legislative priorities works is the priorities are picked at the state convention. A committee formulates 15. They present all 15 to the delegates. They pick 8. And then after the 8 are picked, the SREC, State Republican Executive Committee, and the chair of the party, they assign committee chairs for each priority. And then that chair solicits, and that chair is usually on the SREC, but they solicit people to be on their committees as subject matter experts and activists for each priority. And the 2 priorities I served on were no dim chairs, which holds the saga in and of itself, and the federal overreach, which was, went right along what I've been working on since even before 2015 with my Texas Constitutional Enforcement Group. So, but I'm not going to dive into those details. I think you have a passion for border, so I'm going to go back and talk a
I
little
do.
bit about the border and my
Definitely.
history on the border. Okay. The last session, of course, well, even before the last 2 sessions from 2021 forward, we were really in the soup. Of course, back when Obama was in, we were having troubles. Obama was abusing the stuff. And so there'd been a lot done and a lot of history there about state resistance. But what I did is I expanded the scope of Texas constitutional enforcement to look at the constitutional issues about what powers the state had to defend Texans on the border when the federal government was deliberately violating the law for their own nefarious purposes,
Yes.
going into business with the cartels, right? Well, it certainly was in 2022, which affected the 2023 session. But Kelly Perry was the head of the committee that year. She's from Brackettville, Kenny County, and I think her husband is in Border Patrol. And so she had a deep knowledge and had been a big activist on the border from day one. And so I worked with her in 2023. And what I tried to bring to the table, there were two issues that I focused on the most. One was the Article 1, Section 10, reservation of power to the states to defend ourselves when we are invaded or when we're in imminent danger.
Yes.
And a whole bunch of people do not understand the structure of the Constitution and what gives Texas the right to push back on that. The way I say it is essentially Article 1, Section 10, which most of that part of the Constitution says what states cannot do. It's what's prohibited to the states. But then the very last sentence in the very last phrase has an unless on it. Unless actually invaded or in such imminent danger as will not admit of delay. But the message I was trying to deliver was this was a pre-10th Amendment. This was the part of the original Constitution before we had the Bill of Rights, where we very much well articulated the sovereignty of the states. This under the 10th, under Article 1, Section 10, the Constitution said Texas has the right to defend itself in those situations. Now, and I would ask the question, if a right is reserved by a state and the rest of the rights are delegated to the federal government, or powers are not rights, powers are delegated to the federal government, who is it that gets to decide when and how to implement the reserved right? Is it the person or entity to which the right is not delegated, or is it to the people who have the right? And the obvious answer to that is that the sovereign people of Texas, we, the people of Texas, through our elected representatives, have the right to determine when we need to defend ourselves and how we're going to defend ourselves without any oversight or second guessing from the federal government. Okay? We do not have to seek permission from our daddy, the federal government, to tell us when we can defend ourselves. That's a natural right we have, and it's a constitutional right that we have. And so, and of course, right now, I don't know if you saw just a few days ago, over July 4th weekend, what had happened is some liberals dragged after we passed a statute that said, we're going to have a statute that says if you cross the border, that's an illegal act under Texas law, and we're going to start prosecuting you, which is part of the whole. We justified that. Governor Abbott justified that on Article 1, Section 10, reservation of powers to this people of Texas. And what happened is immediately they dragged us into federal court. And I'm saying, it'll be nice. Ken Paxton, go to it, man. Solicitor General, go to it. Defend us. Make clear that we have the right, that there's no jurisdiction for the federal government whatsoever or the federal judiciary to be involved in this question. That ought to be the very first thing that they ought to be arguing. But they've dragged it on out, and Abbott, and to my displeasure, Abbott said, well, we'll hold off until the courts decide on this. Well, I don't think they have the right to decide. What happened is in the U.S. Fifth Circuit just recently, the 2 of 3 judges said, no, Texas can't defend itself when it's actually invaded or in imminent danger. No, we're the bosses of Texas. You guys just don't worry your pretty little heads about it. Okay. So now that we're going to have to go appeal it to the U.S. Supreme Court, I'm hoping the U.S. Supreme Court decides right. But I will tell you, I think the people of Texas have the right, and our elected officials, especially our governor, have the duty to ignore the Supreme Court when they act outside the bounds of the Constitution and violate the rights of Texans to defend ourselves. So I'm hoping we win. But if we lose, my position for Texas constitutional enforcement and my understanding of the original intent of the framers is that states have rights and powers, and there's only a few enumerated delegated powers to the federal government. And when they go beyond it, it's up to us in the states to push back on that. And that's that was what I did the last time around.
Yes, I totally agree. I come at this from the perspective that Texas was its own republic before we joined the Union. So we were a republic first. We had our
Uh,
own laws and our own constitution, and we joined the United
right.
States. And I don't think that we ceded any powers to the federal government
Well,
beyond.
yeah, and that's a great argument. I think there's a more fundamental argument. If you look at the history of the Declaration, and you read the Declaration, and you look at how the Articles of Confederation were formed and how the Constitution was created, and look at the Declaration. All of them say we are independent states, and they equated states, the word state, to Great Britain and France. And so in other words, each one of those were independent republics and nations of their own, of the original colonies, and they came together loosely through the Articles of Confederation and a little less loosely, but still loose, under the U.S. Constitution. One of the things that a bunch of people don't know about even the U.S. Constitution and how it happened is that the first election for George Washington, there were only 11 states in the Union. North Carolina and Rhode Island had not yet decided to ratify the Constitution, and therefore were independent states outside of the Union that had formerly been in the Articles of Confederation, but now not part of the Union of the Constitution. And it wasn't until the next presidential election that they had become part of the Union, and which is more evidence of the fact that we all states have sovereignty and all have the ability to do lots of things that are not prohibited by the Constitution, and certainly that are not delegated to the federal government. So anyway, that's a long-winded story. Let me say one other thing about border. Stop me whenever you want. Okay.
All right.
The border. The other thing that I focused on was this, and it was part of the priority of the Republican Party in 2022 and in 2024. And then it says, we need to stop payments of Texas and Texas subdivision of tax resources to illegals. Okay. Now that seems like a pretty common sense thing to me. It seems like, you think about there's three areas where this really impacts. Number one, do you want property tax relief in this state? Think of the billions of dollars that are being devoted at the local and the state level to schools, the local emergency hospital districts, welfare, all sorts of things that are going from Texas tax dollars to illegals, right? If we cut that off, think about how much we save in the spending at the state level. Think how much property tax relief we could get out of that.
Yes.
There's that. Think about stopping the magnet, making it where you're not getting free stuff if you're here, helps on self-deportation. And then from a DOJ perspective, you talk about waste, fraud, and abuse. I mean, from that angle, that's the same thing. But this is a humongous issue that it has so many benefits for the people of Texas that I just can't imagine that more people are not excited about it. And certainly the delegates to the state convention were. But when you get to the legislature, when I started walking around looking for one, I wanted to look at the history of this. People have been talking about this since the Tea Party days, back under Obama. But there had never been comprehensive legislation introduced to stop taxpayer services to illegals up until Kelly Perry and I started wandering around back in 2023 asking for it. And we found a legislature. It was Brian Harrison who said, "Okay," he said, we'll put that in if you will give us the specifications." So I know a little bit about the constitutional history. The Supreme Court has said in the past, from a Texas case, that Texans can't deny schooling to illegals in Texas. And what we used to charge tuition to illegals up through the late 70s and early 80s, the Supreme Court told Texas we couldn't, and we just meekly said, okay, ever since. And so we're going to have to go overturn a Supreme Court precedent. But that was I know a lot. I've read that case is called Pollard v. Doe. I'm pretty sure that none of the people that did the case. It was done by the most liberal guy named Brennan, and it was a 5-4 opinion. The Chief Justice said this is the biggest judiciary trying to legislate good outside of its lane that he'd ever seen. I think
Wow.
we could overturn that case if we tried again. And so I wrote up the specs for the bill, and Harrison got it out of Ledge Council, but it was the day before the filing deadline, and nobody has filed it in 2023. But this time around, I started early shopping it. I started up at Cole Hefner and other people at the power structure of the legislature, the establishment. And I thought they might go for it because, I mean, I can't, even the establishment got to understand the power in terms of delivering to what people of Texas want on this issue. But in the end, it was freshman Mike Ocott who ended up introducing that bill. And it got assigned, it could have gotten assigned to numerous committees, but they assigned it to the crowded state affairs, and it went nowhere and didn't get a hearing. And so those are the places where I've been focused on the border. I try to bring my knowledge of the Constitution and the relationship between the state of Texas and the federal government to bear on that. And that's my area. There's so many other issues that matter in the deal, that issue, but that's where I specialize because of my knowledge.
Tom, you have been a wealth of information today. I thank you very much. You have presented more information in a short time than I could have even dreamed of, and I thank you. You've been wonderful. I want to do a deep dive on several of the issues that you have specifically mentioned.
Can I give a call out for my websites and my social media?
Absolutely. I was going there next. You just didn't give me.
Okay, good.
No, you go right on.
TomGlass.org is my campaign website. That's where you can donate to me. By the way, I'm going up against a guy who got $840,000 from the Austin Swamp last time around. Anything you can do to help me counterbalance that this time around would be much appreciated. I'm on X, and I'm doing a lot more on X than I used to. And I'm getting a lot better reach there because I'm not being suppressed the way Facebook suppresses you. It's at Tom G. Glass on X. And then on Facebook, I am Tom G. Glass on Facebook as an individual. And then I have multiple groups there. I have my Tom Glass for Texas campaign page. And I have Texas Constitutional Enforcement, which has over 8,000 members. And I have Texas Legislative Parties, which I think is over 4,000 now, where we focus on those different areas. I've got several others as well, but those where people can start.
Well, we will be sure and post all of those in our comment section below the video. So,
Thank you.
Tom, you have been a delight and a wealth of information. Thank you so much for coming on with us today, and I look forward to having you back very soon.
I look forward to being back. Thank you, Mary.
Thanks for watching the Awake to Truth podcast. Visit our website at awaketotruth.org and connect with Mary Starr on X at awaketotruth_ and on Rumble at Awake to Truth Ministries. The Awake to Truth podcast, a beacon of hope in a world shrouded by shadows.